I move that we approve on second reading ordinance 0821, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. And Becca, thank you very much for putting that together, and thanks to staff for not only putting a budget together, but following it. That's a good thing. We appreciate it. And there's obviously more that we're going to be looking at before the end of the year in the budget season. Thank you. Second item is also a public hearing. Second reading and public hearing of ordinance 0921. An ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Chapter 3.32 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning procurement procedures in add sections addressing change orders.
Right. This is the ordinance that was presented on July 20th. There's just been the one change, which was in the section referencing 32.140.B2, changing the 10% to 20% that was approved at last reading. And this is just addressing a certain lack in the procurement code that our city administrator pointed out needed to be corrected. And that is how to address change orders.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions at this point for Becca? Okay. If not, again, this is a public hearing, so I'll open up the public comment portion of the meeting. If there's anyone in the audience who'd like to address this, now's a good time, the time. And again, no public comments, so I'll declare that closed. If there are no further questions or comments for Becca, I'd entertain a motion. Mr. Bremner?
I move that we approve ordinance 0921.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councilor Wolf. Very good. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you.
Okay. On to business items. Business item 1, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments is requesting approval of a resolution to include Calhoun in the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, PPRTA funding system. And this was something that we heard about 2 weeks ago when Andy Gunning and his staff were here. Tonight we're joined by Mr. Rick Sonberg, who's with PPRTA. So Rick, I think, is going to come up and answer questions. He did provide some handout material to council members. I think there were several items that were in your packet, so we're somewhat familiar with that. But Rick is a font of knowledge and experience with this. So Rick, if you would like to walk us through this.
Good evening. First, let me test the volume. How's this? Good?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Graham and members of the Manitou Springs City Council. Thank you for inviting me. If I could take about a 1-minute presentation and then open it up to questions. The original 4 member governments of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority in August of 2004, and that includes City of Manitou Springs, signed an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, between the 4, City of Colorado Springs, El Paso County, Manitou, and Green Mountain Falls. RAMA joined later in November 2008, effective January 1st of 2009. That IGA between the 5 is what is before you tonight. There's a section 12.3 that mandates, and that's, if you're looking at my highlights, that'd be number 2. 12.3 of that IGA between the 5 member governments states that if it needs unanimous support of each of the existing member government bodies before a new member can join. So that's what is before you tonight. City or town of Calhoun has voted. It's their intent to join if the current 5 member governments vote positively by a majority vote of each of the 5. So that's the first section of that IGA that's before you. A different section 6.1, and that's, excuse me a second. 6.1 provides for the composition of the board of directors of the Pikes Peak RTA. And currently in that 6.1 in the IGA, it states that City of Colorado Springs gets 3 directors, El Paso County gets 3 directors, Manitou Springs gets 1, Green Mountain Falls gets 1, and Raymond gets 1. So it's 3, 3, 1, 1, 1. So to change that composition is a different section of the IGA than the approval of a new member government joining. So there's 2 separate questions before you. However, the composition of the board is not actually before you tonight because the PPRTA board hasn't referred anything out to the 5-member governing bodies asking for a change yet. They're still taking that under research and advisement, and it'll be discussed at their August 11 board meeting. So of the first question, do you want to give a thumbs up to the town of Calhoun joining? That can be, there's 3 options. You can say yes, you can say no, or you can make it conditional. And as you're probably aware, City of Colorado Springs and the county commissioners of El Paso County have both passed resolutions making it conditional upon adequate representation of their 2 governing bodies on the PPRTA Board of Directors. Now, Green Mountain Falls and Rama have both given the thumbs up for Calhoun to join without condition. So you have two member governments, thumbs up without condition, 2 thumbs up but conditional, and the condition can be reversed and revoked. So that's my presentation. Sorry it took longer than a minute, but now I'll entertain questions.
That's fine, thank you, Rick. Good. Council, we had discussed a little bit the quandary that PPRTA is in, trying to figure out how to do the voting and work out the representation into the future. So my understanding is that currently the PPRTA lawyer is researching this, but to my knowledge, she hasn't come back with a recommendation or an opinion on that. Is that correct, Rick?
That's correct. She's researching the concept of weighted voting.
Okay, good, thank you. So that's where we stand with this, council. So if you've had a chance to review the draft of the resolution that's in our packets, it follows the same approach that the City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County has used, and that is to make it conditional. In Section 2 of our draft, or our proposed resolution, it does state, and upon condition of adequate representation of the city of Manitou Springs. So with that, I'd like to hear some discussion. Okay, Nancy?
Oh, I am very supportive of inviting them to join PPRTA. I think that the transportation issues and solutions do end up being regional. I think it's a benefit to us as a city and as a region to have them join. It'll be another small community, which I think is helpful to us. So yeah, I'm very supportive of inviting them in.
Thank you. I believe Councilor Chandler is next.
I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Fortune. I'm generally supportive with Calhoun joining the PPRTA. My question to you is, with Colorado Springs and El Paso County having conditional resolutions, does that in any way impact Calhoun's moving forward with putting this to a ballot issue for the voters this November?
Yes, very much so. As you're probably aware, the clerk and recorder sent out letters. I received one as well to ask if PPRTA wanted to put anything on the ballot for November, and of course we said no, but we'll say Yes, next year, though, at this time. With the response to the clerk and recorder being due on July 23. So I talked to Cindy Tompkins, clerk and recorder at Calhoun, and she said that she was aware of the City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County conditional approvals, which can be withdrawn, which if they're withdrawn, then it kills the ballot even if it's scheduled. So Cindy's going to attend on August 11 when the PPRTA attorney reports back her research on weighted voting to see what the PPRTA board, after they go into a closed executive session to hear the legal advice from the attorney, then we're going to come, or the board's going to come out of executive session and open session, and potentially the board potentially could take some action on the weighted voting concept. I have no idea what that might be. So Cindy at Calhoun's can be listening in the open session to see what the PPRTA board does on weighted voting. She can pull the plug on the November ballot by the end of August by asking her board of trustees to not approve the IGA with the clerk and recorder agreeing to be on the ballot and pay the clerk and recorder fee. So they can pull the plug depending on what the PPRTA board does on August 11, and they have the fallback option of going to their voters in April of 22.
Thank you.
I think Steve was up first, and then Julie, okay? Steve?
So this conditional aspect that El Paso County and Colorado Springs has, that that Calhoun will have representation. What is that representation? Is it just the one person that would be on the board of directors? It seems to me that Calhoun, if they're going to put it on the ballot and all that, they would have representation. So it seems like a moot point to me. I don't understand what the dilemma is.
The dilemma is that the board of trustees could approve some concept of weighted voting where the two larger entities and potentially Manitou would get more votes due to population, for example. I'm just guessing because they have not, all they've mentioned is the phrase weighted voting. So there's been no math, no formula, no calculation. So, for example, if they come up with some formula on August 11, then per 6.1 and some of the other sections of the IGA, they have to refer that out, their recommendation of a different board representation mix formula. They have to refer that out to the 5-member governments, and the 5-member governments would have to, and that's in my paragraph 6, by a vote of a minimum of 2/3 of each and every governing body of the 5 governing bodies in PPRTA would have to agree to the new board mix other than the current 3-3-1-1-1. It would have to be a minimum of 2/3 of each and every one of the 5-member governing bodies. So any one of the 5, even with less than a 2/3 vote, could kill the PPRTA board's recommended revision of the 3-3-1-1-1.
Seems to me potentially that weighted decision could be way in favor of El Paso County and Colorado Springs. It could be like 100-1 compared to our tiny 5,000 population Manitou Springs. So it could be pretty significant if they go by actual population.
Well, that's where they're going to have to, first, the board, before it refers it out, is going to have a majority vote of the board, majority of the 9 to refer it out. So that's the first speed bump. And then if it's too extreme, then any one of the other member governments could kill it if, could negate any change to the 33111 if you don't have a minimum two-thirds vote of the entire membership, regardless of attendance, of each and every one of the 5 member governing bodies.
If I might, in attending the PPRTA meetings, I kind of got the sense that the El Paso County Commissioners, and there's 3 of them, or the Colorado Springs City Council members, again, 3, they're a little worried that the addition of smaller jurisdictions could let us form a voting block, and basically, we little jurisdictions would get together and beat up the big jurisdictions. And in all honesty, they generate the larger share of the revenue, so I think we benefit from that, but there is some concern on their part. Rick, if that doesn't sound quite right, straighten it out for me.
And one of the city council members from City of Colorado Springs mentioned, and I'll qualify it that it's one board member, not the whole board, but one board member said that he thought it would be best to keep the ratio of the City of Colorado Springs being a third of the total. That's one board member said that. That's not the entire board.
Yeah, Julie?
When you were talking about El Paso County and City of Colorado Springs conditions, is the condition, I'm sorry if I'm supposed to look at the actual language, but I don't have it in front of me. Is the condition so that they themselves approve? Who's to decide whether the voting is reasonable? Or does that go back to it's up to the 5 jurisdictions 2/3 thing? I'm confused about that. Who decides if that's acceptable?
The first step would be the PPRTA board making some kind of decision on August 11 on the weighted voting concept. So whatever that calculation is, if that receives a majority vote from the PPRTA board to then be referred out to the 5 member government governing bodies, then that would happen. Then the city council would then either agree by 2/3 by 2/3 or not of what was referred out by the PPRTA board.
So when we visited this last time, I was under the impression that we were going to wait until after you made your decision on August 11th with your attorney advising you on the weighted voting so that we knew what the weighted voting would look like and how would that affect us. Would it really diminish our voting power or not? And so I'm wondering, is there any serious harm done if we push this over until, what do you want me to look at, Nancy? Okay, and so that the condition in our resolution would be up to us to decide if we're happy with the weighted voting that gets voted on August 11th?
Yes. Now again, the vote to include Calhoun can be a clean vote without conditions. Because you would, if the board wants to change the 33111, it has to come back to the 5 member government governing bodies. It cannot be changed unless every one of the 5 by a 2/3 vote gives it a thumbs up.
Oh, I appreciate that. Although I assume there's a good reason that the attorneys for the Springs and the county suggested they put the condition in there, so I appreciate that being included. Okay, thank you for explaining.
Good, thank you. Council, any further comments or questions for Rick? I guess not. Okay, Mr. Shada.
Rick, could you go over who all the current members of PPRTA are right now?
Yes, the
Board.
City of Colorado Springs, the board members?
Yeah,
By
yeah,
by
the
name?
entities represented.
Oh, the entities, okay. City of Colorado Springs, unincorporated El Paso County,
Right.
City of Manitou Springs, Town of Green Mountain Falls, Town of Rama.
Rama, okay, all right. Now, can you answer, how has the board are they usually allocating funds kind of per capita in general?
Yes, both.
Okay.
There's three categories that were set up by the original ballot in 2004. That 55% of the money is capital and goes out to the 5-member governments by population. 35% is maintenance and goes out to the 5-member governments by population. 10% goes to Mountain Metro Transit.
Okay.
To answer one of the earlier questions on the budget amendment, without having the budget in front of me, my guess is the reason there was more the prior year is probably due to carryover. If any member government doesn't use all of their maintenance or capital, they keep it, it just rolls over to the future year. Because every year since the Great Recession, our revenues have gone up. In fact, in our mid-year budget amendment, we increased our revenue, budgeted revenue, by 10% because we were trending that way. We're currently trending another 10% higher than that. So our revenue is gangbusters.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
just follow up. So is that per capita funding allocation that you outlined in terms of in those two buckets, is that part of the operating agreement, or is that just sort of kind of how generally the business has been done?
In the capital 55%, that's a board practice. In the maintenance 35%, that's in the ballot.
Okay. So it's just been by convention in that one category to follow that?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Chandler?
So just to recap, Resolution 1021, Section 2, which reflects that the language of which says, and upon condition of adequate representation of the city of Manitou Springs, is adequate language and in keeping with Colorado Springs and El Paso County with regards to, so we're basically using that same language in our, is that strong enough language to, it seems very vague to me, but I respect that if that's adequate language, I feel comfortable with that.
Just to quote from the City of Colorado Springs resolution, and upon condition of adequate representation of the City of Colorado Springs on the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority Board of Directors. So I think that you're copying, sounds like your resolution copies City of Colorado Springs.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I think we're at a point where we could entertain a motion. Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure. I move we approve resolution number 1021, a resolution by the City Council in favor of the town of Calhoun's request to join the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Rick, thank you very much. I guess you can let the town of Calhoun know. So
I will, thank you, sir.
we appreciate you coming out and explaining this to us. Thank you, and for the work that you do.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item, item I2, is sustainability and resilience training. And Denise, if you could introduce our presenter.
You bet. Conrad come on up, Conrad. We brought Conrad on for this year to help with the sustainability and the environmental resolution 1919. I believe that's the correct number. I'm trying to remember it from memory. And so he's been working with that the last couple of months with Skylar. And part of what we asked him to do is really train about sustainability so that we're all speaking the same language and have the same reference points. So he will be giving this tonight, and he's given it to each department. I think this is the last department to receive this training. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Conrad.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Mayor Graham and City Council. It's great to be here and to train you on these important topics that you find in many of your guiding documents and many of the decisions that you make. As I endeavor to explore more about how the City of Manitou Springs is committing itself to these principles, I'm learning that there's a lot more that you're doing than maybe you even know, and I hope that this training will help reveal that information and give credit where credit's due. So thank you for having me. Again, I have this little presentation here, and so that'll be my guiding light. I hope this technology works out for me here. So we'll forward the slide here. So this may seem like a lot, but we'll get through it pretty quickly. It's just I'm making sure that this is kind of a general overview. This is my life's work, so I've really delved deep into this stuff, but I'll try to keep it on the surface, and I invite you all to explore further. And I will provide a follow-up email with some of the exercises. Really, it's a framework for what you can do, you can use to make your decisions. After this presentation, I'm pretty confident that you'll be able to use that framework without me in the room. So that's my hope anyways. All right, I'm Conrad Schloerbaum. I was Sustainability Coordinator for Pikes Peak Community College, Board Chair of Green Cities Coalition. We've worked in the region for cities to become more sustainable. I've also been a community advisor on the Manitou Springs Environmental Climate Action Work Group for 2 years. I have a Master's of Professional Science in Environmental Studies and Sustainability. Some of the work I've done in relation to this is I did my capstone on the Regional Sustainability Plan. And if you're not aware, we have a Regional Sustainability Plan. It's called the Pikes Peak Region 2030 Plan. And the organization that oversees that plan is the Peak Alliance for a Sustainable Future. So you can go to their website and you can look up the comprehensive plan, and Manitou Springs was very much involved in that process back in 2010, 2013 timeframe. So there is a guiding document for the whole region, and a lot of these issues involve the whole region. It's not just Manitou Springs or the city of Colorado Springs or El Paso County. It's across the board. I've also worked with the city and county of Denver on a climate adaptation plan. I've worked with Pikes Peak Community College on a high performance building. So not only looking at city, but looking at specific infrastructure. I've also delved into that. So I have experience both on the planning and on the infrastructure side of the house. All right, so I am a contracted employee with the city of Manitou Springs. These are the goals that I have, 7 goals to accomplish in 7 months. And you'll notice the first goal there is to conduct sustainability and resilience training for the city staff and city council. I'm also going to support the municipal zoning and subdivision code rewrite, provide recommendations on a sustainability and resiliency advisory board, advise the city on compliance with the Tree City USA designation, advise the Parks Department on a sustainable tree trimming policy, provide recommendations on hiring a sustainability manager, and consult the development of a new resolution that supersedes Resolution 1919. So the purpose of this training is to train city staff and city council on the core principles of sustainability and resilience. It's, in a sense, just so that we're on the same page, speaking the same language. The term sustainability and the term resilience is often defined in different ways, depending upon where you go for your information. So I am referencing a lot of core research and seminal articles and books that discuss this. In this particular training, I'm focusing on sustainable development, which is how a city develops sustainably, how an urban area develops sustainably and is resilient. For the departments, I focus on organizational sustainability, which is how an organization such as the city administration, how they can approach sustainability practically in their individual departments. There's also just general sustainability, which is just general principles you can apply to many different areas, including your own individual pursuits. So the outcomes of this training is to articulate the 4 pillars of sustainable development, apply the 4 pillars. Again, we won't do that with the exercise, but you should have enough information to do that on your own. Articulate the 3 dimensions of resilience, and also look to apply those dimensions on a past or future shock or stressor. And I'll go over what a shock or stressor is. Benefits of this training: make progress on Manitou Springs Resolution 1919, Plan Manitou and Climate Action Plan. Make strategic decisions that are financially, socially, environmentally sustainable. Yes, you can accomplish all 3 of those things all at the same time. Improve the city's resilience to shocks and stressors. So I pulled this from Plan Manitou, the core community values. Sustainability is up there, but I will tell you that all 4 of those are involve sustainability, in terms of community engagement, economic vitality, historic preservation, and ongoing awareness of the unique value of our environment here in Manitou. So even though sustainability is mentioned in only one of those values, I want to help you understand that all 4 could be involved in sustainability. So again, changing the perspective, that it's more than just often what we think of as just the environment. It includes, so just really using those 4 pillars to help understand these. I was going to play this video, but I'll give you my presentation afterwards so you can watch it, but it's news coverage of the passing of Resolution 1919 and the community planting of the tree out here in the park. The news coverage that was involved with that back in 2019. It just really shows the kind of interest and of the public in this work, and just a celebration of coming this far with it. Diving into the dimensions of sustainable development, I chose for you a definition that I felt didn't leave, it wasn't pie in the sky, wasn't necessarily a vision, but got right down to practicality here, and that is, it's a way to understand the world as a complex interaction of economic, social, environmental, and political systems. Notice that if you can't address an economic problem without also considering social problems, environmental problems, and political problems. So these things are interconnected, these systems are interconnected, and they're interdependent. You cannot separate one from the other. Oftentimes we consider, these in a vacuum, and I think we could benefit more if we try to stretch our imagination to think about them all together, all as one cohesive framework for understanding how a city operates. So there are trade-offs. You can focus on, you can really benefit the economy at the expense of perhaps social cohesion or the environment. So it's important to know that there's trade-offs between these, and that's what makes these decisions hard. Are the trade-offs and what community values, and trying to understand and navigate all of that, as well as there's co-benefits. And that's the thing I'm most excited about, is if you think about all these and you come up with a decision and you have co-benefits, meaning each one of those systems is benefited by that decision, that's where you want to go. And I will say, in order for something to be called sustainable, it does need to offer a benefit for each one of those systems, not just one, but all of them. So the first dimension for sustainability, for sustainable development, is economic prosperity. It's often where we live in the city of Manitou Springs here. I do have a background in tourism as well, so I understand the tourism industry and how a city can be so dependent on the economy or on tourists coming to town. One of the things we look at with economic prosperity is economic equality, economic diversity, looking at supporting diverse businesses that are beyond tourism, so that businesses that are in our operation all year and really benefit the local economy. So When it comes to, we're looking at social mobility, so just think, do students coming out of the high school have opportunities for jobs? Can they see themselves living in Manitou for long periods of time, and there's jobs for them, and there's a way to progress in their careers? And are there jobs for service workers, jobs for blue collar workers, jobs for all sorts of people with all sorts of interests? The more diversity, the more strength a community has. So the more offerings, the better. And also lifting those most vulnerable people out of economic poverty for the high per capita income. These are metrics. You can actually measure these. So I think it's important to look at economic prosperity when we make our decisions. So some examples I'm pulling from Plan Manitou and Resolution 1919. Again, looking at more diverse year-round economy, looking at being able to, people from all income levels being able to afford housing, looking at the establishment of a green business program, so supporting businesses and sustainable practices. These are all existing in your documents and are all wonderful examples of economic prosperity. So once again, Manitou does have a lot going on, and this is definitely moving in the right direction. The question is, how do you get there? Not just about planning and having targets, but how do you get there? How do you accomplish that? What metrics do you use to actually accomplish that? Second dimension is socially inclusive. So we're looking again at reducing poverty, improving access to services, building social cohesion, a sense of place, a sense of identity, a common sense of identity, improve public health. Those are all really important for a socially inclusive society. And then if you go to examples, we're looking at, again, buying homes and or living in the community, amenities and quality of life, thinking quality of life holistically, not just physical, but emotional, social, spiritual, all those that Manitou has all those to offer all residents, and to increase food security is another big thing. So third dimension, environmentally sustainable. So this is looking at our natural environment, but it's looking at our actions towards the natural environment. This is acknowledging that the natural environment provides us a means, an environment to live in, to thrive in. And if we were to honor the environment and what we do, we would do these things. We would conserve natural resources, we would reduce waste and pollution, we would preserve parks and open spaces, and develop an ecologically literate citizenry. So those are four really solid ways to approach this, and these are things that we can do to improve our stewardship of the environment. Examples of that, again, in Plan Manitou and Resolution 1919, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2005, by 2020, looking at ecosystem health for open space, trails, and parks, protecting pollinators and ecosystem health through reconfirming our commitment to organic land management. And a lot of these things, what's interesting is the city has already done these, and there's a framework that I want to drop right here called the Star Communities Framework. And you can actually, the city of Manitou could pursue this assessment framework and get credit for all these things. And it would help them expand beyond what they're doing right now to reach higher goals. A good city to look at as an example is the city of Steamboat Springs, and they've completed an assessment, and their assessment is on their webpage. So there is an assessment framework, there is metrics for this, and there are cities pursuing it. This Star Communities have now gone under the U.S. Green Building Council, and one stellar example is the city and county of Denver, which received LEED Platinum as a community. And it'd be really interesting to engage with them to see how they have done that, how they've accomplished the pinnacle of sustainability for that very populated and diverse city. So the fourth dimension is good governance. This goes to accountability, transparency, participation, and commitment. Thinking about these things and restoring and building trust with the public. That they know government has their best interest in mind, that they're being forthright in what information they have, and working with the public to accomplish the vision that they would have that has been decided on for the future of the city. Some examples of that include increasing participation, so including the public in decision-making in a meaningful way, a way in which they feel like they were part of the decision-making process. And I know that can take time, and I know that can be a sacrifice and be a stretch on resources. But you might find that the decisions that you make are more informed, and communities there to support them. And when you have to make a difficult decision, they're there. They have your back, and it's more likely that that decision will be supported and be successful because of that initial support going through. And then another one is to improve sustainability for municipal operations. So this is looking at, this is a lot of the training I did for the other departments, and that was looking at, planning, looking at finance, looking at parks and rec, parking, all those different areas, and incorporating sustainability into those areas and helping them be practitioners of that work. It's not just on the sustainability expert to do the work, the one person to do the work. It's people do it all the time, and they can expand and benefit from doing it more. And so I know the city's considering some infrastructure investment in the coming years, and thinking about investing into sustainability and resiliency as part of those discussions. And then a green resident program. We talked about a green business program. Here's a green resident program, simply highlighting the efforts that the residents have endeavored in terms of becoming more sustainable, and saying, if I can do it, you can do it, and we can all benefit from it. And like I said, a lot of residents are very much sustainable and very much supportive of this work, and it would be great to highlight their efforts and help others adopt those practices as well. So this is general sustainability. This is commonly applied beyond just the scope of a city. Sustainability means enduring into the long-term future for systems and processes that are able to operate and persist on their own over long periods of time. I will add that it's more than just systems and processes. You can think about infrastructure. You can think about relationships. You can think about policies. You can think about support for residents. You could put a lot of things in here to endure in the long term. And we're looking at, again, the three interrelated dimensions of sustainability. So beyond sustainable development, often it's just three pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and ecological. They often just lump the political and governance into the social dimension. But I want to reiterate that sustainable development is 4 dimensions. And I do want to mention how I've interpreted sustainable development for an organization. This is the training that the departments received. So if an organization were to want to accomplish sustainability, they would look at it from a financial perspective, a workforce perspective, environmental perspective, and a governance perspective. Again, trying to accomplish all 4 of those with the decision-making that each department does on a daily basis. And once you start doing it, it becomes more natural. So this is a sustainable development exercise. So I will provide a worksheet for you to do to practice what this looks like. It's pretty straightforward. In fact, it's exactly what this is here. And looking at all the 4 pillars, as well as how many dimensions does the decision apply to? What are the trade-offs and co-benefits between one direction or another, and looking at how to improve now that it was implemented. Often we just say, okay, we've built that street, we've done this improvement, we've made this decision, and then we leave it at that, and we don't circle back around and see if it actually met the performance metrics we've set up for it. Again, establishing those feedback loops is really important. Jumping into urban resilience, this is real quick, just a few slides, and then we'll be on to questions. So resilience is the ability of a community and the biophysical systems upon which they depend to resist and absorb the impacts of natural hazards, to rapidly recover from those impacts, and to reduce future vulnerabilities through adaptive strategies. So I often say resisting or absorbing impacts, they're inevitable. So how can we plan for them and reduce their impact on city infrastructure, for example? Rapidly recover from those impacts so we can bounce back and bounce better, and reduce future vulnerabilities through adaptive strategies. So what have we learned from the impact of this natural hazard, and how can we plan for the future, knowing what we know now, so we can improve and become and have a more cohesive approach moving forward? So again, I mentioned shocks and stressors. Shocks are short-term, stressors are long-term. Manitou has had to deal with a lot of these. It takes a different approach for each one of them. So looking at wildfire shock, floods, heat waves, disease epidemics, social unrest, so on. For acute shocks, you're gonna have to have a different approach for those as you have for stressors, which are more long-term and more difficult to address, to know how it's impacting a city, and to know what measures can be taken to plan for those. So again, an example would be creating a baseline knowledge about our assets, strengths, and risks, in terms of influencing a community in the future. Who are our most vulnerable people in Manitou Springs? How are they going to be impacted by each one of those shocks or stressors? What kind of response will the city need to have to ensure that they receive the right services and are able to bounce back, and are first to respond to, those sorts of things. Really thinking about that, really going through that in your mind and putting a plan down for how that would look. Looking at diversity. So knowing that it's beyond just, we're interconnected, we're not separated, and there's a lot of there's cities around Manitou Springs, there's an environment around Manitou Springs, and there are different people within Manitou Springs. And knowing how diversity strengthens us, but it also, we need to work together, right? We need cooperation among regional partners so we can address things in a coordinated effort rather than in a separated effort where we might be weaker. And then integration, looking at constraints just as natural hazard decisions regarding new growth and future development. How are things going to work together under the strain of more of a larger population, of a higher demand for resources? All these pressures coming down on Manitou, how are we going to deal with these constraints? What is the plan moving forward? And then adaptability, looking at, in terms of the economy, for example, looking at local businesses recovering from these disruptions. How can we get them to bounce back quickly so they can recover and then keep going and thriving in this city? So again, there's an exercise. You can look at you can identify a shock or stressor. You can look at the 4 pillars and view the shock or stressor through those 4 pillars, and then looking at what's the response look like, and then what can we learn from that response if we were to go through an exercise with it. So again, this is something like an exercise you would do, and you can kind of see it like a game, but it's really a game that that is real life for the city, but it's worthwhile in terms of looking at how existing plans and existing documents apply or don't apply to this. This is the next level, right? This is you're saving resources when you invest into resilience. You're saving resources when you invest into sustainability. Now, it's an investment initially, but there is a return. And there's a return not just in monetary means, there's a return in terms of social cohesion, and there's a return in terms of the environment. And working within all these systems, there becomes a lot of benefit. And if you don't think about those, if you just think about what has money attached to it, then we're discounting all the things that the environment hands us for free, or that people are doing for the city for free. And I think I think those things need to be highlighted and understood and incorporated in decision-making so that we can truly acknowledge all the benefits and maximize them. All right, just to review concepts, again, sustainability is an approach that identifies long-term goals, examines strategies for achieving these goals, and it systematically evaluates using indicators. It's very much about outcomes. Again, the 4 dimensions are economic prosperity, social inclusivity, environmental sustainability, and good governance. In terms of resilience, resilience is an approach that emphasizes change as a normal condition, recognizes that a system may exist in multiple stable states, and focuses on building adaptive capacity to respond to unexpected shocks and disturbance. Again, this prioritizes process over outcomes, and there's 3 dimensions looking at absorbing an impact, recovering from that impact, and then planning through adaptive strategies. All right, I'm open to any questions you have.
Council, we have questions or comments for Conrad? Councilor Chandler? Not surprised.
Well, first of all, I would just like to tell you how thrilled I am that you're here. This has been a long-term goal of the Climate Action Work Group to start this training and this awareness. And I really appreciate the 4 pillars. Quite often when we do environmental work and we're talking about environmental issues, we come up with, oh my gosh, if you're for the environment, you're anti-development. And so I really appreciate that it is integrated and it is an overlapping puzzle. So I really appreciate that. Knowing you as well as I know you, I thought that when I read through this packet that you were going to ask us to do some homework. So on slide 22 of the 32, the sustainable development exercise, I really love that. And I loved it so much that I want to really, that's going to be my litmus test going forward when I look at policy from now on. Because I thought, well, because I thought, well, he's going to call on us. So I'm going to need to look at a policy. And, the first thing that came to mind was the incline. That COVID gave us an opportunity to close the incline and do an incline reservation system and tie that to parking. So I thought about that in terms of economic prosperity and social inclusivity and how that impacted the businesses and the residents and how, that hopefully positively will affect the environment. And then that trade-off of, well, we have those wristbands, so we had increased trash. So I went through this process and I thought, well, I really want hope that council really takes a good look at using that as a blueprint. And I was wondering if other communities do, councils and governments use that as a blueprint when they're looking at each policy decision that they make.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Chandler. One example of a city that does incorporate this is the city of Fort Collins. They use something called an environmental scan. What's interesting is they receive specific training from city staff on this scan so they understand how to apply it to policy decisions. And I actually went beyond their scan to make it a little bit more intuitive and incorporate all 4 pillars. They just approached 3 pillars. And so mine's a little nuanced, and I also made it more, I would say, intuitive in that it just walks you through the framework rather than having to conduct that training knowing that I had limited time with you. I wanted to make sure you had an application piece of this training and something to leave with, right? Something to apply, something that you can easily apply it to your own personal life as well or another organization. It's really adaptable and intuitive, and that's what I was going for.
Thank you. And I just had one additional comment. So you use the food assessment as one of the items in the slide. I want us to, I'm really hoping that as we move forward with sustainability, that we not only look at issues, but we look at are we approaching the solution with the 4 pillars? For example, the food assessment indicated that we have some food insecure individuals. And so one of the solutions, and I think it's a very good short-term solution, is to have Karen Share come in here. From a climate action work group standpoint, while we're grateful for that, we also see that as, well, let's take a look at that, because you're bringing in a lot of packaged food, not always healthy food, and what's the next step beyond that? Can we look at community gardens? Can we look at more farmers markets? Can we look at, Flying Pig Farm and accessing that more? So just taking an issue and not just saying, well, we check the box and, Karen Share comes once a month, but taking a look at that, the impact of the solutions that we make in the short and long term.
Yeah, and that's interesting, looking at it comprehensively, not just a one solution, one check the box type of thing, but is the food that your most vulnerable population receiving nutritious? And even when they receive spaghetti squash, do they know what to do with it? Do they have a recipe? Do they, and so there's a lot of different, the city of Colorado Springs has a commercial kitchen that they use to educate people on how to prepare food. It's not home economics. I took home economics in high school and learned how to cook and kept up with that afterwards. Took an international cuisine class, actually. But is that class available at the Manitou Springs High School? Is that available to just regular people? Do they know? And does that work with their schedules? And there's just so many other things to navigate there. And that's why I would encourage the city of Manitou to reach out to these already established organizations and efforts elsewhere, and see if they cannot offer those same opportunities for your residents.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thanks. You did a great job at cataloging that our intent is great. Plan Manitou kind of lays out everything that we intend to do. But has the next step been taken to show what we have done, catalog what we have done in support of all these, as well as what we still need to do, similar to the solutions that Councilor Chandler brought up? And it's not in your deliverables that I see, so I don't know if staff is looking at that, or what's the next step? Where's the action plan that goes with this? I'm curious.
Yeah, so it is acknowledging what has already been done. That's honestly where I would start. Let's celebrate where we are, what we've done, and the Star Communities framework, as well as a lot of the other frameworks. I was talking with the police and fire, and they've done some training and are I guess contributing to some sort of reporting framework. And the same data they're using for that reporting framework can easily be used in the Star Communities framework. So it's a matter of just incorporating that framework and starting to put the information together. It will be difficult for the city of Manitou to interpret things as being sustainable. I did my best with the training to demystify the concepts and show that they're applicable to various areas throughout city staff. But it will be, it is an ongoing, by doing this, is this sustainable? Ongoing questions about that and interpreting that. And I think that's going to be something the city's going to have to figure out what to do beyond my contract period, is how to continue the work and how to continue to celebrate and identify all the benefits that have come from that work. For example, I'll give one example. The finance department realized that there was a back office full of files and stuff like that, and they were able to digitize those files and save space in their department, and put an office in there and really feel more comfortable in that office space. Maximizing those resources, digitizing those resources so they can access those resources, so they can provide better services to Manitou Springs residents, to save on resources so they don't have all this paper floating around the office. There's so many benefits. This is one example: saving money, saving resources, improving services, and being able to be more transparent because of the access of those resources, of those documents. And that's an example, that's a true example of sustainability. And I didn't need to, like, after the training, they came up with that. And so it's not as too stretch of the imagination, and I think there's a lot of work that the city could highlight that that's existing. And just putting it on a website would go pretty far even, or just highlighting it on social media, for example.
Councilor Wolf, please.
I don't know if this is a question for you or for Denise, but two of the things in your presentation talk about at the end of 2020, things will be done. One of them is establish a program to audit and improve the sustainability of municipal operations, facilities, and develop measurable goals and benchmarks. Has that been done?
So part of my work is taking another look at Resolution 1919, which that is where it's coming from, and looking at realistic goals, and looking at and connecting those realistic goals with actual resources, making sure the resources are there to accomplish those goals. And I think that conversation between interested parties and what's realistic is really necessary in order to, we don't want to just accomplish things rashly and without the resources necessary to accomplish them for the long term. And I think that's something that was an improvement for that resolution, and I think I'm hopeful I can provide a new resolution that would be more realistic and understand the resources that Manitou has to make progress on that plan, on that resolution.
Is that your way of saying, no, we don't have the program? No?
Yeah, I can respond. Yeah, Resolution 1919, I think we all agree was pretty lengthy and challenging to hit, and that is one that we have not hit. There are numerous ones we've not hit, so Conrad is going to be looking at that. What have we done? What do we need to get in place? And what's a new resolution, as he stated, that's doable? And what staffing do we need in order to do that?
Okay, does that mean we also didn't accomplish the other 2020 deadline that's in your presentation? I'm trying to find it right now. Where the heck was that? Oh, well, I guess I'll assume it wasn't done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Chandler?
So Resolution 1919, which was passed in 2019, had 17 action items on it. The first 7 had 2020 accomplished dates on it, of which that was one of them. One of the things that the Climate Action Work Group was concerned about was that it was lengthy, and given our resources as a task force, basically, it was just overwhelming. We did a deeper dive and took a look at the fact that there was a resolution passed in 2006, in 2007, and also a 2-page white paper that came out that council approved in 2008. And so we thought, well, this might be a good opportunity for us to take a look at those resolutions and combine them, and and just make a really comprehensive, but also just updated resolution that we can actually do some tremendous actionable items. It is one of the reasons, and I make no bones about the fact that I am very much in favor of a Sustainability and Resiliency Advisory Board. And one of the things is to look at our legislation, but also to get us ready for legislation that's happening now. So part of that action plan that Mayor Pro Tem was talking about is getting us ready so we're not caught unawares with, for example, I'll use Senate Bill 1162, the plastics ban. Governor Paulus just signed that. So that has an effective date of July 1, 2023, but we need to start looking at that now. And I have that good news about the Drake Power Plant. It looks like that will be closing way ahead of schedule. So to get us just ready and knowledgeable, and also educate the community about these things that are happening and how it impacts the residents and the businesses in our community.
Thank you. Denise?
The other item that was in here is the food assessment, and that has been completed. So that was completed. That was to be completed in 2020. And again, I do want to say that's part of what we brought Conrad on, is his expertise. We did not have that expertise in staff to really support the environmental group, and that is Conrad's role as he comes in and looks and sees what's the next step and how do we do it and what's the staffing needed to do that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from council? Julie?
Is that staffing in the budget?
Not at this time because we don't know what the staffing is. So we're waiting for Conrad to come back, and then we'll be looking at that and what it looks like and bringing it to you to say, is this what you want, don't want, in October. So yes.
Anybody else? Okay, I guess not. Denise, did you have any comments that you'd like to make regarding this?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Conrad. His expertise, his professionalism, and his ability to communicate has really gone. I think Councilor Chandler can agree to that. That has been just amazing in getting the group moving forward and all of staff moving forward and really thinking about things in a different way. So thank you as you continue to help us.
And thank you, Denise. Just coming on board and knowing that this is going to be a whole city approach rather than just a one-off approach. And I think the city's doing a lot, and there's a lot to take credit for, and there's a lot of growth still. But I'm just really excited for the future of City of Manitou Springs, and just look forward to working with the city moving forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Conrad. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Yeah, Councilor Chandler, another comment?
I just want to say that there were a lot of things on that resolution 1919 that we did and are accomplishing, though, and we forget to talk about that. It looks like we're moving forward. We will become the first pollinator district in the state of Colorado. We did launch the tree planting program, and now we're moving into a very successful residential tree planting program, and we've achieved Tree City USA status, and so there's just a lot of things to celebrate. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. And we have a robust parks, trails, and open space system that I think is incredible. So thanks again, Conrad.
Good, thank you. And with that, if there are no objections, I'd suggest we take about a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we'll discuss the COG railway cars. Hi, if we could kind of go ahead and take our seats, we'll get started again. Okay, our next item is the decision on the COG railway cars. So I believe we're going to start with presentation. Is that correct, Denise?
Yeah, let me go ahead and ask Michael and Doug. I believe you're coming up to present on this one. So they'll be presenting. I do want full transparency as I presented to the parent group. And I told them I was presenting because we didn't have staff at the time. And then I stepped out during the conversation, so I was not part of any of that. All I did was present, and I think everybody here from PAIR would agree to that. So now Doug and Michael will be presenting for you guys to discuss and decide. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And gentlemen, if you'll just give us your full names and addresses, and then you've got the floor.
I'm Michael Mayo. I reside at 3 Dudley Road in Manitou Springs.
I'm Douglas Keithley Edmondson. I reside at 7 Keithley Road, Manitou Springs.
Thank you. Gentlemen, do you have slides for us, or do you want to simply answer questions, or?
Well, we're going to go ahead. Do you want me to do? I'm going to go ahead and go. So we're going to go ahead and just flip through some of these slides. Council is aware of why we're here, and we're not going to spend a lot of time moving these guys along. Of course, you know about the COG railway cars and that they're being stored right now, the G.E. Johnsons, and it's the history and so on and so forth. This is in your packet, and we've presented this to you, I think, at least twice. So we're going to keep moving along here. We're going to get down to what our real purpose here today is, and that is to present to you what our real proposal is. And our real proposal is that we have come to you to ask for the Higginbotham Flats location to be as a display for the COG engine and to store the second one. Oops, okay, I don't know where I'm at with that. Was that it? That was it. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about my background on this project. At first, I was involved as a private citizen with the community engagements a couple years back in 2019 when we were still having in-person meetings, and then later a couple of the webinars. And then I was approached, just again in the spirit of transparency, I was approached a few months ago to possibly be a project manager for the placement of these cars. I have no contract or agreement with the city of Manitou Springs at this time, and I'm here still at this moment as a private citizen. And our ideas are that we have these two cars, and it would be a real travesty if we lost them. And the clock is ticking as far as their current storage. In fact, the clock is pretty much run out, and we have to act very quickly. There's city budget. There's money in the city budget to at least do something temporary with these. So that is our platform at this point in time. Is that we have two cars, and we are going to be asking to display one of them for 3 years at Higginbotham Flats and store one of them for a period of 1 year until they are either one is either sold or there's a permanent home found for them, or that the paradigm shifts and we find that the display of the one car has actually advanced the agenda of some of the involved stakeholders, namely Parab and Save the Flats, who desire to develop the Seta Park. They've wanted to do it for a long time. My feelings is that a project like this could spearhead that and greatly advance the timeline, the development of a park in that area. And I feel that it would be a smart move for Manitou Springs. If these cars were lost, the chances of us getting any more cars from the COG Railway are going to be pretty thin, and obviously we would lose these older historic vehicles, our cars from the early 1960s. Mike, you have anything to add?
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, council, for the opportunity to speak with you about the proposed Higginbotham Flats Park. It's a very simple solution. We're asking primarily for a permanent display as well as a temporary display of 2 rail cars that represent an integral part of Manitou's history. These cars were donated to us almost three years ago at this point, and after the donation, there was the formation of a task force for the purpose of considering the disposition of these cars. The task force worked very hard in considering the disposition of these cars. We spent a great deal of time thinking about it, planning it, and in fact, in addition to the recommendations of the task force at this point, there has also been significant support by the community in the way of first a straw poll that was taken on next door. Close to 81% of the respondents supported the placement of the cars on Higginbotham as part of a gateway park. In addition, we also had
Mike, you have to get pretty close to the microphone if you would. So
right.
it's about 3
In
inches.
addition, we've had some community engagement. There were public hearings regarding the placement of the cars on Higginbotham Flats. Again, there was overwhelming support for that proposal. The proposal was also placed on the city website. Again, time after time, people were supporting the placement of these cars. And more recently, I posed the question on Facebook, and there was an overwhelming positive reaction to the placement of those cars. I believe there was over 100 positive reactions based on the placement of the cars on Higginbotham, and there were no negative reactions during that time frame. And that was a short straw poll, again, on Facebook that was conducted over a space of 2 weeks. We look at the history of these things. They are tied to the city. In fact, Higginbotham Flats itself has a history and connection to the Cog Railway cars. In 1888, Major John Holbert, who was appointed as the first general manager and CEO of the Cog Railway, developed Higginbotham Flats in 1889. It was part of the Manitou Heights subdivision. He developed those lands with his partner, Archibald Williams, who incidentally also has ties to a railroad. It's not the Cog Railway, but he had ties to the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. So right off the bat, we have lands that are connected to the railroads. There's such overwhelming support for the placement of these cars on Higginbotham that one of the town's residents, our city's resident, had suggested a name for the park, and that park would be Martin Frick Gateway Park. As you all know, Martin has ties to Manitou Springs. He came here at the same time that the Cog Railway cars were purchased by the Cog Railway in 1963. He was a German-speaking citizen at the time, and he was the one who actually interpreted the manuals that were used in installing these Cog Railway cars on the railroad. Martin Frick was well loved by the community, and I can't think of a better way to honor Martin Frick by naming this park after him. And also, it would be a great way to not only honor him, but also be a wonderful tribute not only to our history, but also to Mr. Frick. So, I encourage council to consider the placement of these cars on Higginbotham Flats before the train pulls out of the station and before these trains leave the city for the last time.
I would also like to make a point of the fact that right now the area that is in consideration is being used by Wildcat Construction for their equipment and materials storage. Their project's coming to an end very quickly. One of the current concerns that I have as a citizen is it's going to be the same old song and dance. They're just going to pull out, take their equipment with them. There's still piles of refuse from the last time that area was used for that, old road material, chewed up asphalt, things of that nature that are still up there, piles of it that are still up there. And this would give an opportunity to kind of put the pressure on them to clean up as they go. And then these cars would be placed in an area that is non-functional as far as the emergency helipad. And again, as my involvement with Mecca and the Rainbow Falls project, this would give an opportunity just to shift the usage in the paradigm of that area. You know, it would give an opportunity for Parab and Save the Flats and other groups to get their foot in the door. I mean, I understand that there's a couple of park benches up there, and then the remains of the unfortunately defunct community garden that was there at the time. I mean, and that's pretty much it. It's overgrown, and there's just a lot of waste and trash up there, and we would like to see that get changed. And this is an opportunity to do that. Come 3 years from now, if you guys want to make a decision to move the car, and something's done with Hiawatha Garden or another place is found, at least we still have a car to work with. If we get rid of these now, or we let this opportunity pass us, I don't believe it will return.
It's a wonderful opportunity for City Council to serve as stewards of the land. We have the basis here for not only a marquee park in our park system, but also we have a trailhead that leads to other parts of the city, including Agate Hill. You know, now's the time to end the Brownfield. Think about it for a moment. It's almost been a generation of Manitoulins that have experienced a brownfield, with the exception of 3 to 4 years when the area served as a community garden. You know, it's been ugly. You know, I live in Agate Hill below this, and it saddens me every time I see this brownfield that's being spoiled by oil spills. And let's face it, there are oil spills at the site. It was encouraged. And you know, I think it's time to put an end to it.
Thank you. Council, we have several other people who want to speak to this topic. So we could either, if you want to ask questions of Mike and Doug at this point, we could do that, but we will have some other people making comments. Perhaps we should hold our questions till later. So, okay, shall we go ahead and hear the other individuals, or Mayor Pro Tem, go out comment? Oh, chasing them off. Okay, so looks like what we'd like to do is hear the other folks, and then we'll have a general question session. Okay, thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I just make one statement? I
Sure.
wanted to let council know that up there right now is zoned as a low-density residential. We found that out. It is not zoned as a parks, even though Plan Manitou shows that it's zoned as a parks. So I've asked our planning department to go ahead and go through the zoning to zone it as a park, and we'll be bringing that to you in the near future. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, we've had several individuals who wanted to, indicated they wanted to speak to this topic. So I guess I'll start with Dave Wolverton. Dave, if you can come forward. And for each of you, if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would be good. If you would give us your name and address, full name and address.
Good evening, Council. My name's Dave Wolverton. I live at 213 Pilot Knob. I've been a Manitou resident now as of August, 33 years. I'm the vice president of Save the Flats. I've been intimately involved in that property since the late 1990s. It was our desire when we formed the group that we felt it was important to try and do some level of preservation in the transition between the Great Plains and the entrance into the mountains. And that property is on that threshold. Excuse me. So, you know, we put a great deal of effort into trying to convince the developer that owned that property to develop something other than storage units. We met with their administration extensively one afternoon and tried to convince them that, you know, please build a hotel, a restaurant, something other than storage units. Long story short, we lost that battle. Although we continued in the process, we were involved in the development process, and what we learned is the zoning regulations for Manitou in commercial property does not have facility for storage units, so they had to get a conditional use permit to build the storage units up there. So we got involved in that process, and again, a long story short, we were instrumental in getting wrought iron fencing instead of cyclone fencing. We got them to do painted stucco instead of painted block. And then they agreed to do dark bronze roofing, which they didn't carry through on, and nobody from Manitou Planning enforced that. So unfortunately, when you come down Bar Trail, the storage units dominate the landscape, and we're sorry about that. We did everything we could to prevent that from happening. But I felt compelled to come down here just to give you that little bit of history that wasn't included in our letter to you, but also to talk to you the importance of that. These are now my own personal views, but I worry that we put something like that up there, that it starts to set a precedent. And I'll give you an example. When I was thinking about this afternoon, if next year the North Pole decides they're going to fold up and they donate the Ferris wheel, is that the next asset that ends up there? And pretty soon it becomes the repository of wayward toys. And it ruins that view shed we're talking about. That transition between the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains becomes littered with more man-made components. And that's what we set up in the beginning to try and prevent. And that's what I see. This is a slippery slope. This word temporary I saw in this proposal is what scared me. I said, whoa, that's a real arbitrary term. I mean, temporary could mean 2 weeks, it could mean 20 months, it could mean 10 years. There's no parameters. There's probably going to be no contractual agreement what that temporary timeline looks like. So that's what brought me down here. I don't come down here very often, but I was compelled to come down here because I've got a big history up there. And in closing, the other thing that sort of bothers me about this whole thing, and I've been kind of following it from a distance, is the fact that you put up $85,000 for this project. I don't really see, the argument that these things are historic is, I suppose, subjective. But we've had a mineral spring broken for 5 years, one of the most important mineral springs in town. And we have an agreement with the Native American community that we're supposed to have stewards of these resources, these mineral springs. We're supposed to make the water available 24/7, 365. And so we're spending $85,000 on these cog cars when we've had a mineral spring broken and unavailable to the general public for 5 years. So I really question the priorities here, and why this is so important, and why we're sitting down here tonight debating what I think should be a mineral spring repair. I mean, that's more important historically than 2 cog cars that were built in the 1960s. So that's my little piece of comment tonight.
Okay. Thank you, David. We also have Bob Todd wanted to speak on this.
Good evening, Council. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be before you this evening. As you may know from a short note I sent prior to the
Bob,
council meeting.
can you give us your name and address first?
Sure. Bob Todd, 20 Manitou Terrace. Referring to a note that was sent at 4 o'clock today, as you all may be aware, both my wife and I, who have spent 40 years owning a home together, up in Agate Hill combined, are opposed to this. But before I get into the opposition, I want to just briefly mention 2 points of gratitude that I personally have. One is really turning this hall into a place of the public with comfortable seating, great HVAC, and really good sound. That's a huge accomplishment. Secondly, I'd like to express gratitude as a citizen where I believe the citizens of Manitou and the business owners would all agree that this council, over the last 31 some odd months, and city administration have made huge gains for the city. And what I see has happened in that period of time is council always comes prepared for the meetings off the packet. You always have a healthy debate. You've maintained diversity on the council. You've augmented that very handsomely with the Ward 3 and Ward 1 replacement. And particularly community engagement, which is what I'm here about, what the whole group is here about, has really accelerated. And the planning department, the public information officer, and the city clerk have really gone the extra mile to see to that happens. This particular project, I'll get back to it now. I would make 4 points about it. One is Higginbotham Flats is not an neglected brownfield. Number two, it's important to maintain the flexibility of Higginbotham Flats. Number three, it is COG advertising no matter how you slice it. And number four, my recommendation. So the recommendation, bottom line is, and I'm going to draw an analogy. Several years ago, there was a proposal and inquiries about putting an adult bookstore up on the top of Higginbotham Flats. A task force was formed. There were many community engagements over this issue. It went on for more than 12 months. I think it was about 18 months, about whether or not the task force recommendation, the Planning Commission concurrence, the Park and Recreation concurrence with some swiggles, was in favor of putting the adult bookstore up there. But you know what happened? This item percolated. Council had the wisdom to defer the decision. And once it percolated for a long period of time, we finally found a way to thread that needle. I think the same is true of these COG cars. That's my bottom line recommendation. So to briefly hit on the points regarding COG advertising, there are now COG cars, a COG car in Woodland Park to the west, to the east, the Widener Soccer Stadium, to the north, the Trading Post. If you don't know it, the Trading Post has two cars mothballed behind their building. They still have yet to figure out how to unveil those. And then you have down at the Broadmoor Hotel, a major center with major expansion, which is driving their guests to use the COG Railway and all the follow-on that comes from that. So the Anschutz Company is a very sophisticated negotiator. There's no doubt they know the marketing value of these cars. They donated them. They also get a tax credit because they donated them. So think about
Bob,
that.
can you sum up, Bob, please?
Yep. I will sum it up by saying I did not hit the points of the Platts is not an elected area. Just quickly, the initial approach up there was to put low residential housing up there for artists and so forth and so on, and the community garden went up there. Why didn't those things fly? Because there was a TAP fee agreement with the initial developers of the storage unit to take their $1 million investment in sewer and water, and any person who wanted to apply for a TAP fee would have to pay $30,000, I believe it is, for TAP fees. So that made it prohibitive for the community garden to water. It made it prohibitive the residential community idea. It is a hiking trail in lieu of access to Williams Canyon, which Agate Hill does not now have, nor the whole area beyond the post office. We don't have a way to get out into the outdoors. What's happening in the future is we have a residential home going up at the base of the trail, the loop that goes up to Higginbotham Flats. That's going to be a big improvement. We had a proposal to put a composting site up there to address some of the remediation. That proposal never got developed. I would like to suggest to you, it's been a neglected area because the city's not had the resources to chase these things down. $85,000 would go a long way to clearing out underbrush and dead trees that are up there that present a fire hazard. The homeless situation, there's at least 3 to 5 reports a year of homeless and camping up there. I think it's a question of funding priority. The last point to be made is that area, we all know it, has been a staging area for, yes, construction. What will happen with the Ruxton Avenue development? Where's that staging going to be? The city's going to always need a staging area. We're built out. We also need an emergency vehicle area. If you go up there today, if we had had a fire, you would see we would have very limited space for just emergency operations. So all this is important to keep. Again, John, just to summarize, I think council should very carefully consider, let this percolate in the community before reaching a definitive conclusion. The opposition has only shown its hand when, because of COVID and all the distance the community does have, Dinah Mann took the initiative and wrote that letter. And with all due respect, Mike Mayo rebutted it. I hope I've provided some input for you to have a debate across these points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
John.
much. Okay, I see we have another hand out there. Yeah, if you would come forward, please, and if you'll, of course, give us your name and address.
Christina Grow, I'm at 108 Lafayette Road. And I have a few notes here on my phone. First of all, Mayor Graham and all the council members, I just want to say I sympathize with your position that you've been put in to make a decision about this, because 3 years ago, I think it was a
Mayor.
much different.
We need name and address, I'm sorry.
Christina Grow, 108 Lafayette Road.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
That's okay. So I think the city council looked a lot different 3 years ago. I don't know how many of you were here, but I don't think very many. So now you're being asked to make a decision. And I think it is a tough decision. However, I've been a resident for 20 years, and I don't think that putting these train cars either temporarily or permanently on Higginbotham Flats would be, I want you to vote no on it. The reason why is because as a resident, when the park space is eventually developed, I want a place that promotes recreation for me and my family. And I don't see how this train promotes recreation for our residents 8 to 80. I think it's more geared toward visitors that are interested in looking at a train car or whatever. Or, as Bob Todd said, is advertisement, which is basically what, I think I agree with him. Also, it's taking this refuse, basically, and placing it somewhere. Also, I don't participate in Nextdoor.com. I don't follow Mike Mayo on Facebook. So I think there's a lot of people we're missing from participating in those social platforms. And going back to the presentation that was given tonight on the sustainability, talking about inclusivity was one of the main 4 pillars of that, looking at each policy with that lens. And I don't think that the train cars promote inclusivity. Also, naming the park perhaps after this German guy. Again, it's like another place named after some white guy. Can we think a little bit bigger than that? So yeah, I would like to, I do serve on PARAB, and I have for several years, so I'm not speaking on behalf of PARAB. However, PARAB does not support this idea of placing the cars up there. What do I want to say about that? Really quickly, I know I don't have much time. PARAB. We think really strategically about our park spaces and how we use the space. Like, for example, we have tennis courts, so we're not going to put tennis courts at another park. So, in Manitou, we have very limited space. So we already have a train car here in Memorial Park, or a train engine, I'm sorry. And there are other train cars that people can go look at. It's like, so why do we need to use this real estate to house more train cars? So that would be duplicative, and I don't think it would serve our residents in those broad terms. Also, regarding PARAB, we do not have a master plan yet for that park space. It's still zoned something else. So when it is zoned parks and when we do develop a master plan, I feel like placing these cars there kind of forces the issue. We're gonna either have to incorporate them somehow, or we're gonna have to wait to, if our master plan does not include those train cars, then we're gonna have to wait until they get moved to do our master plan or do the master plan that the citizens have, given public input to create up there. So I think it's, either way, it's like a lose-lose situation. We either have to do it or, yeah. Lastly, the train cars being up there. So it's going to promote, the Gateway Park idea and the visitors stopping. There is no bathroom there. So I don't know why we would encourage visitors to come off of the highway, park there, look at the stuff, and then there's no place to go to the bathroom or no infrastructure. So those are my thoughts, and thank you all for listening, and best wishes in your vote.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, and from our council packets, I think you saw that, you saw the letter from Parab and one from Save the Flats, both opposing. If there's no additional public comment on this, I think it's time to open this up to council for questions and comments. Anybody want to start off? Mr. Bremner.
Yeah, I don't think it's advertising for the COG. I think it's advertising for Manitou Springs. And I think it's an appropriate place to put those cars, and I like the proposal of it being temporary for 3 years. I would like to see that Higginbotham Flats developed as a sort of a gateway into Manitou Springs. If we could have trails going down into Agate Hill, promote possibly, I mean, I've heard the proposal of a gondola coming down from there. So it'd be a way to get people out of their cars and just walking around Manitou Springs. I think it'd be a good proposal. So I'm generally in favor of the idea.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilor Chandler?
Thank you. So I thought this packet was quite different than the last packet. It had a lot more in it. When you presented that, this is just the same, presentation, I didn't, that wasn't my experience. First of all, the last time we discussed this, I don't recall us talking about a 3-year temporary situation, which would definitely take us into a different council and a different mayor. So I have a number of concerns. First of all, even for a temporary installment, in the packet, you're looking at $64,500 for a temporary installment. I have to agree with Mr. Wolverton. I would rather see that money spent on the mineral springs. My concern with these cars is they were manufactured in 1963. My house was built in 1949, and we're talking about calling these cars historic. I didn't get to have my house put in the historic district and not have, 3-story urban condos across the street. So I think we have to, really define historic here. I am not a fan of a static display costing $64,500 that sits there. Other concerns that I have are one of the proposals to decrease vandalism and homeless use is high density lighting. So we are looking at a code rewrite where we want to decrease the lighting and not have blazing lights up there. I am a fan of using one of the cars as long as it's not a static display. If a car could possibly be in Hiawatha Gardens and used for something like a coffee shop or part of the micromobility hub, I would be okay with something like that. But a static display that the city is going to have to maintain, and any way you slice it, this is advertising for the COG. We can go, we can talk about that ad nausea. My question to you is there any other place to store these cars should we want to use one for a non-static use, say Higginbotham Flats or Hiawatha Gardens or somewhere else, in the short term? So that I have that question, because it sounds like, my gosh, if we don't make this decision tonight, we're going to have to get those cars out of G.E. Johnson and we're going to have to sell them. That's the only option that we have. And I'm just wondering if we've explored any other ways to store those cars if we want to store those cars. So I'd like to have a council discussion about that. I do take very seriously the idea of that Parab and Save the Flats are opposed, and there are residents that have come tonight and also emailed us expressing their concerns about having a COG railway up at Higginbotham. I've been really trying to keep a really open mind about this, really open mind. But first of all, 3 years is not, in my mind, short term. And Higginbotham, once it is rezoned as a park, can become a park without those trains, right? So it's not just those trains that are going to define a park. It's the park that's going to define a park. And I really want to see that beautiful, beautiful overview park preserved with some limited parking and certainly utilized as an emergency staging area if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Within that, there was a question about, is any thought been given to another storage place? So maybe Doug or Mike, maybe you'd want to respond to that now, or Denise?
I can speak. G.E. Johnson did tell us that they need it moved. I did not follow up on that. I think it's fairly quickly. And then we've looked up at Public Works. If we move it there, it's going to cost some money to do some grading and other things for storage. So that's going to take a bit of cost. I don't have the amount. And then I know we've talked to some other people in Manitou, and we just don't have a commitment from anybody at this point. So we're kind of stuck of if you guys tell me you want it stored, I will find a place. It's going to cost money. I don't know what that will be, but I can continue to look if that's what you say you want one stored or whatever that may be. So that's kind of where we are. I don't have an answer for that at this point.
Okay, thank you.
In the proposal, the $64,500 cost, there is a $5,000 line item to move one car. I would support storing one car and using it in an interactive way, perhaps at Hiawatha Gardens or some other location, for example, a coffee shop or something like that. But I am not in support of a static 3-year temporary display up at Higginbotham.
Okay, so, and just to clarify, so you're talking about storing one for future use, potential future, so then the other one, would we sell it? Is that, or you would
That
just?
would be up to
the question mark?
council.
Oh, okay, so
rest
that's
of
not
council.
part of
But yes, that
necessarily
is
part of your, maybe.
what I'm
maybe. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. I do need my glasses. Yeah, I'm very supportive of this recommendation to temporarily install as something of a installation as a scaled-down version of what Concrete Couch had proposed with the signage over it at Higginbotham Flats for 3 years, and to temporarily store the second car at Higginbotham for 1 year to basically assess if we can put it at Hiawatha. Right now, it's premature to make that. We can't put it at Hiawatha right now. So, and I think that that's a really good compromise based on what we discussed the last time. Parab won't be getting to a master plan for Higginbotham until next year at the earliest. So, and generally, master plans take more than a year's time. So I think that a lot, when folks talked about percolating, it's been, this concept has been percolating for quite a while now, and that'll give it another couple of years to percolate. You know, we've had numerous requests and long-term interest in having it as a gateway park up there. And so there'll be signage, some sort of signage up there one way or the other. I just think that the proposal to use the car is a very good, I don't consider it advertising. And I want to make it real clear, the proposal is a fraction of the site up there. It's a very small, really, when you look at it, there's still plenty of room for emergency assets if needed, which is very rare occurrence to need emergency stuff up there. So, and there's also still plenty of room for more traditional park, or what the parks folks are asking for in terms of the overlook and so on. So most of it is still available for that sort of stuff. I also want to emphasize that next to it, it can be developed. The city doesn't own a couple of the plots up there. So there's definite risk of part of that entire parcel up there being developed, and we have zero control over it. It won't cost $85,000, and I'm sorry, I missed the 64. I don't know what that entails. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that. And so anyway, bottom line, you know, I do not want to invest any more money in, or any money in storing them when we've got city land that we can store them on. It just seems ridiculous. It seems like a win-win to me. So I continue to be in support of this recommendation for 3 years and 1 year. Thanks.
Thank you. Natalie?
So I guess I also look at it differently too. I was working with the chamber on gateway signage several years ago, and that was sort of the westernmost area that the city owned. And so we had looked at that area for potentially a static structure that would welcome folks to Manitou. And so I could see that proposal coming, sort of regardless of whether it's a COG car or a different sort of welcome gateway sign. So I do think that area has that potential for the community, and I don't really want to lose that. And I guess for me, it's also, I do look at it as, when I look at art and I look at impactful art and sculptures, I look at the color of the COG, I look at the size. I think that there's an opportunity to have something sort of interesting and impactful. And then if we were to do the signage a different way, it would, I just don't think it would be as visually interesting if we weren't able to recycle and upcycle and work with the materials we have available to us. And I think we can do it in a way that's again, I think it's sort of an interesting opportunity that would be difficult to recreate without the COG car. So that's my
Thank you. I have real reservations about putting the COG cars up on Higginbotham Flats. I thought about it quite a lot at first. I kind of liked the idea, but then I really have concerns about vandalism, concerns about traffic. We don't have a plan yet for Higginbotham Flats. In the future, this might work pretty well. Problem is, we're down to the wire. We need to make a decision. G.E. Johnson wants those cars gone. If we had someplace where they wouldn't be susceptible to vandalism, I guess I'd feel differently. But I'm not excited about the idea of putting those COG cars up there. I think we're going to end up spending more money trying to take care of something that becomes dilapidated and vandalized and neglected. a number of years ago, I was involved with Save the Flats. We put the benches up there. The next thing we did was a year later, ask the city if they could put a couple picnic tables up there and garbage can. And the city basically came back and says, we're not staffed sufficiently to take care of that. You'll just attract people and there'll be garbage up there and we won't get around to taking care of it. And that's kind of what, that's my fear, is that we will have another place that we think is nice and maybe it'll be good for a little bit and then it'll fall into some dilapidated condition. Now, as I go around town, I see some of our property that I think needs attention. I mean, look at some of our other things. We have a great history of not taking care of our assets. Look at the library. We're here 25 years later. We're struggling what to do with that library. Well, we know what to do with it. We need to have a fairy godmother come and give us a bunch of money so we can fix it up. I mean, we're just always one miracle short of having a solution. And I'm tired of kicking the can down the road. I do not like the idea of something temporary or half considered or half baked or not integrated into a plan. I'm tired of this. I think the idea had some merit, but God, we have all these dreams that we can't exercise, that we can't really put a foundation under because we keep dreaming and we don't make up our mind, and then we end up paying money to just get in some sort of static situation where we can't actually move forward. So I guess I would favor selling one of the cars, and if we could find a place where we could store it on city property but not at Higginbotham Flats, I'd entertain that. If not, I'd sell the other car too. And I love trains, and I think it's a great historical thing, so I say that with a whole lot of consternation and angst. Anybody else? John?
As much as I really like kind of the history of the rail cars and the whole 9 yards, I think we have to also be really honest to where we are. And the numbers that I have are essentially from the Wikipedia page of that catalogs where all the COG railway cars are. And I didn't really have a feel for this until I kind of did the numbers. Of all the COG cars that have ever been made, there are 17% of them that are in museums, okay? 12% of them currently exist in Manitou Springs. The one over here and the two over at the trading post, okay? If you count the number of COG cars that are in the Pikes Peak area, okay, that's 25%, all right? 33% of all the COG cars that have ever been made are currently in service. So they're right in town. You can go up and see them today, okay? 20% have been scrapped. They don't exist anymore, okay? So, yeah, I guess to me, what I'd like to speak about in terms about is this Higginbotham Flats location. And to me, the most compelling thing to me was what Dave Wolverton talked about, is this incredible mesa, okay, in which you can look out into the plains, you can look into the foothills of Manitou Springs, and you can look up and you can kind of see all the mountains rising up to Pikes Peak. And to me, I've always thought that it would be just amazing if the city would acquire all that space up there and have that as open space. And I think that ought to be a worthy goal, okay? All right? The Save the Flats group, okay, saved us from a come-and-go filling station that was likely going to just go right on up there, okay? All right? And so I think the additional kind of, I think we have enough of these COG cars in town, is I guess what I'm saying. And I'm willing to let go of all of them, okay? There's another 33% of them that are sitting up there, okay? That if we want one in future years or whatever, I would suggest if it's that meaningful to us that we buy it, okay? And really figure out what we're gonna do with it, okay? To me, these cars remind me, they were kind of given to us. My garage is full of all sorts of stuff like this that I think we ought to get rid of and find a home for them of somebody who would truly cherish them, really want them, as opposed to us just storing them and kind of flailing around and trying to figure out what the heck we want with them. So I guess in conclusion, I really think that if you kind of add this up, 33% is the present rolling stock, okay? 13% are currently in Manitou Springs. 25%, okay, are currently displayed in the Pikes Peak region. How much more of these red cars do we need to have as a small community? Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, well, yeah, okay. Julie?
I appreciate the idea of storing these that the mayor and I think Judith mentioned. But my concern is if it's going to cost us $5,000 just to get them out of G.E. Johnson, and then I have no idea. I mean, so many people, they pay money for the storage unit year after year. It's ridiculous. I can't imagine what the cost would be to store these trains, or even just one of them. Do we really want to spend that much money when we can't put, a decent road on for our citizens, and we can't take care of the projects, as the mayor had mentioned, that we've already undertaken that are now floundering? I don't think it makes sense to spend money to store these things. We don't have any future need or use for them. And as John Shada mentioned, if we did, we can probably buy it when we need it, but I don't think we need to buy it now. It reminds me of buying a dress because maybe someday I'll be skinny enough to fit in it, and it sits in my closet the whole time. It's like we don't need it when we need. If we want it, we can buy one later. So I'm voting no.
Councilor, thank you. Councilor Chandler?
Do we know what the value of one of the cars is if we were to sell it? Do we have any idea? Do we know that? So selling one for $5,000 really wouldn't. The scrap price. So the only way we would get more than scrap price would be if someone wanted the train, right, and was willing to pay more for it. So it really wouldn't be worthwhile to sell one train in order to pay storing another one, say, up at Public Works for a short period of time. And if we don't use it in a year or two, we sell that one too. That was where I was going with this question. We don't know. Okay.
Maybe Denise, can you respond to that?
I really don't know, right? So we're waiting for your direction tonight, and then I'll start researching and doing what's needed to see if we can sell them, if it's a need elsewhere, if you want to put it up there, whatever that may be. I'm waiting for your direction, and then I'll start working on it.
Okay, thank you. Council, further comments, or I think maybe if there's a motion to be had here? Mr. Bremner?
I'll make a motion that looks like it's going to go down in flames, but I'll go ahead and make it. I move that we store one car in Higginbotham Flats for 3 years as proposed, and store the other one for 1 year up at Higginbotham Flats temporarily.
Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Okay, motion fails 3-4. Julie?
I'd also like to make a motion, as Denise suggested, that we have this put on the forthwith, docket, as we might say, to deal with immediately, to figure out how to minimize the city's liability going forward. I don't want us to have to pay $5,000 a month storage, for example, because we're too busy to figure out if we should pay the $5,000 to bring it over to scrap metal, or if we should, advertise it for a few years and see if somebody wants to buy it. So I guess what I'm saying is, maybe it doesn't require a motion, but if we can just have consensus perhaps that this will be fast-tracked by staff so we can figure out what's the most economical way to get those things out of G.E. Johnson and to not have to spend more money than necessary doing so.
Well, thanks, but I just, it sounds to me like maybe that's moving it from one place to the next, and if we've got our own property, that's one thing, but it sounds to me like we don't really, or we'd have to do significant road work to put them up at Public Works, and maybe that's a stretch even then.
Roy just reminded me, and so I'm just providing this information, that we stored a trolley up at Public Works at one point and it rusted away. So I just want to share that with you. Again, I'm not asking, I just wanted to share that.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I didn't make myself clear. I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to spend more money than necessary. I want to find out what is the least expensive way to get rid of these things. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
I was just
All right,
trying
I'm
to be a
sorry.
little more diplomatic about it, but
oh.
apparently it didn't make a lot of sense.
Sorry, okay, maybe I'm just a little dense tonight. Mr. Shada.
You know, I think we've been talking about, and I think it's something that the railway has promised us, that there would be out-of-town parking for the Cog Railway. And to me, I think these two cars would be perfect at an off-site location for parking in terms of to be shuttle for, to market over in Colorado Springs. And so to me, I think we ought to make an offer back to the Cog Railway that, you can have your two cars back. They can put them at that outlined parking area. That would be a great kind of, placekeeper. It would be in context of what's going on. People could look at them and anticipate that they'll be riding probably a train that looks very similar to the top of Pikes Peak while they're waiting for the shuttles. So I understand what Julie's talking about in terms of, so I guess I would like to, investigate some creative ways of handing them off, okay? I think the least ideal thing is just hauling them to the scrapyard and turning them in for $5,000 worth of metal, okay? I think we ought to figure out, where they could be stored in the interim, but the goal would be that they would not be placed in the city of Manitou Springs, that we would want a good home for them. In other words, if one of them wants to go to a park in Lyman, Colorado, I think we ought to offer that. I think we ought to mail something to Trinidad and see if we can do advertising for COG trains down in Trinidad, okay, or up in Gillette, Wyoming, and offer to transport them up there, okay? I just think we just do not need either one of these things in town.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
Another idea is, and I agree, the scrap metal would be like the last resort. I just don't want to spend $100,000 in storage while we come up with a better solution, But another idea might be to see, and I don't know, but if Colorado Springs might like one. They have lots of parks and they keep building more of them.
That's a good point.
So if the COG doesn't want it for their own off-site parking, which I think would be fabulous, and it would also be good advertising, because some folks might drive by and say, look at that big parking lot with that cool-looking train, what the heck? Oh, maybe we should check it out. So, if you're already here, anyway, I just thought we should ask, Park and Rec, see if Karen Paulus, or whatever her name is interested, and then see if the COG is interested, and if not, then task staff with trying to figure out how, where else, can we advertise, in addition to some of the locations that John Shada suggested, just figure out how to get rid of them so that we don't have some huge storage bill at the end, 12 months from now.
John, do you think you could put your idea in the form of a motion?
Yes, I move that we direct staff to see if we can find other locations, other people who would like to have these cog cars, okay? That we would be willing to transport them, you know, given that we would review the costs in terms of to those locations. Some other place that would truly love them, okay, and really want them, and that's really in their plan. And that our least ideal thing would be that we would send them to the scrapyard. I don't know how to put that in any clearer framework of saying that, you know, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, some kind of time period that we know at the end of it where we stand with it. I guess to me it's just more of sort of kind of, you know, not a motion, but I mean sort of kind of staff direction.
Okay, Denise, your response?
Just two things. I probably have about a month to 2 months to get this done, so we will work diligently because G.E. Johnson is wanting to build on their location. And I just want to make sure you wanted to put that we're willing to transport because that could be fairly expensive. How about that we will bring back some options because that could be a pretty expensive endeavor.
That's fine too.
Sorry, Julie, did you have a comment?
Just on that point, just the idea that maybe we would transport, if it's $150,000 to transport this thing to Wyoming, we might choose to send it to scrap instead, you know. But I also wanted to see if, as part of that motion, if this is supposed to be in the form of a motion, if we could also put some type of deadline when we want to hear back about the research. I know Denise said, you know, a month or two. So if we could just be assured to get, because I understand you could do research for 10 years, you know, so when do you stop, you know? So if you could give us some preliminary info within a month or so, I think that would be very helpful. And I understand that staff may also be stuck in a situation of having to start writing a check to G.E. Johnson if we don't get it out of there. What exactly, is there a firm deadline or is it more squishy?
I just got an email that says that we need to get it moved, but I did not get a deadline. I'm trying not to push anything until I had a direction tonight. So I will be following up, probably not tomorrow, but by the end of the week on this one.
So if you find out, for example, that, you know, we're going to start charging $1,000 a day starting August 15th, I assume you'll let us know? Okay, thanks.
Councilor Chandler?
A couple procedural questions. One, if we are directing staff, we should be formulating a motion that would need a second before we open it up to discussion. So that's the first thing. So if we are going to, if that is a motion, it will need a second. If not, I would want a friendly amendment about reaching out to the COG first before we reach out to anyone else to see if they are interested in perhaps a static display in their offsite parking lot.
Okay, good points. Thank you. Natalie, you had your hand up.
I was just also going to, I'm concerned about staff time because I know that we've already spent years on this. And so I don't want to set up another situation because, again, I feel like there's other matters that they're working on. So just that may be a consideration as well in this process of whatever direction we want to send them, how much time that's going to take.
Okay, good point too. So I guess we have a general sense of maybe what we want to do. We need to refine it. So I guess in my mind, we maybe have a list of a priority as to who would get first right of refusal, if you will. So maybe the COG, and maybe the city of Colorado Springs, and then maybe other nearby communities, Cripple Creek Monument, Lyman, whatever. Maybe the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden. I'm talking out loud here. I'm not trying to present this as a motion. I'm just seeing if, okay, it looks like there's some support for the ideas, and certainly, and then maybe we try to do as much as we can in a month and see if they get back to us if there's interest.
Mayor?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Could we get if we're talking about a formal motion, can we have a formal motion
Okay,
stated,
we'll have to get a
please, for
formal,
the
okay,
record?
right, okay, John, would you like to make that? Okay, let's, 5 minutes be okay? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Right away, John. All right, thank you. I was just informed by Mr. Shada that he has a motion prepared. So if we'll resume the meeting, Mr. Shada, you have the floor.
With great help with the mayor. I move that we direct staff to find an alternative location to store the cars while we find a new owner. That we set a time limit for storage of approximately 6 months and about a $5,000 approximate budget. That we direct staff to offer the cars back to the Cog Railway for display at an out of Manitou Springs satellite parking location, and that if the COG is not interested, they will offer the rail cars in the following order to the city of Colorado Springs. Smaller regional jurisdictions in El Paso County, such as the towns of Monument or Fountain, the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, jurisdictions outside of El Paso County, or any other entities that might love to have a COG car. Do I have a second?
Seconded by Councilwoman Wolf. Okay. Yeah, you have some, okay, we got the second here from Julie. Okay, so open to discussion. Councilor Chandler?
It was my understanding that it costs about $5,000 per car, so could we entertain a friendly amendment of of approximately $5,000 per car? To move them, because you quoted $5,000 to. Okay. Okay, so we would have to pay to move them and store them.
Well, I'm suggesting that we pay to store them, but that's open to negotiations in terms of if we found a worthy entity as to
Got it, okay.
how they would get there.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, maybe Julie might have a magic wand that could just send them there.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Okay. Julie, did you have a comment?
Yes, I know I seconded it, but now it occurs to me, if the way the motion is worded, is it meant to intend that if we get to 5,000 before we get to 6 months, that's the part of the sentence that's missing, like whichever comes first or something? Like, you know what I mean? We can't agree that it's going to be 5,000 up to 6 months. Do we just stop at the 5,000 mark? Is that the intent?
My motion was that we set an approximate storage budget of $5,000. I said approximate.
Approximate, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? If not, let's vote. All in favor of the motion as stated? Say aye. Okay, so we have 6. All opposed, say nay. Okay, thank you. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you. Okay, next item is consideration of an advisory ballot question. And, okay, I'm the one that put this on here, so let me do just a little bit of explaining. And this, just to be upfront here, I don't think this needs to take very long because I know we've got the executive session coming up. I had checked with the city attorney, and it is possible if council wanted to put advisory questions on the ballot that we could do so. The deadline for doing that is the last regular meeting we could do that at would be August the 17th. So that's 2 weeks from tonight. So that's a heads up. If we wanted to do it, we could, it would be a non-binding kind of a question. It would be an opportunity to ask voters what they think. The danger with that is if it's too vaguely worded or if it's postulated on information that's incomplete or pending, then it's really not any better than, say, a doodle poll. So we do have that. I debated with myself whether or not to even bring this up. I think I trust you all as adults to be able to make up your mind on that, to see where it might be useful, where it might not be. That said, Rob Dannon has expressed some concerns to me, and I imagine those are shared by others. I would suggest at this point that we let Rob come forward. He can make his comments. We'll have some discussion. It doesn't need to take a lot of time, frankly. But if council really has this desire to do that, certainly we can take a little time. Mr. Dannon? And we need your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Rob Dannon. I live at 112 Cave Avenue in Manitou. And thank you for allowing me, Mayor, to share my thoughts with the entire council. What I wanted to speak to in relation to how the memo is worded, which includes the library in that possible consideration for an advisory ballot question. I'd first like to just share some context that we all know. It was based on your directive to us as a task force. And I just want to just quickly go over that because it shapes what I want to particularly refer to in relation to any consideration of the library having a ballot question in terms of getting feedback from the community. As you know, back in October, there was initial conversation at a work session that our task force and Christine Lowenberg, who was our project manager, we were given a directive by the council to move ahead in trying to fulfill a 20-year obligation of making the library a functional library for the future. And with a resolution that was actually passed by the council in December. And in what the charges that you gave us as a task force, we have met and continue to work on the benchmarks and outcomes that we said that we would. Everything to date that you've asked us to do, we have done. And that includes acquiring an architect, acquiring a capital campaign council. And as you know, next week, the architect is coming to speak with you about the design process as it stands right now. And so by putting the library in a ballot question would stop that momentum completely. I mean, there's really nothing we could do until that question was resolved. And so put the momentum that we have been moving on for the last year to a standstill. It would just stop us in the water. And I don't know if we can get that momentum back. And so as I said, you gave us a charge back in October, finalized it in December, and we have met that and will continue to meet the requests that you have for us. Now, speaking to the reason that this would even be considered about getting feedback from the community, again, this has been a 20-year process. We have been, we meaning the community, has been giving feedback for the last 20 years on what needs to be done with the library. In the last year that this task force has been around, that has been one of our main thrusts, is garnering, all we are as an advisory group, bringing to city, bringing to the architect now, feedback from the community. And one of the initial prior approvals and feedback that we should do something about the library was the match initiative. That passed in large part because the library would be receiving funds for moving forward in the ADA compliance and expansion. Also, if you just bear with me, not only in the last 20 years with the charrettes that went on and the feedback and the surveys that were done, just in the last year alone with our task force, we have done 4 community forums, receiving community input. I put out, I write it, but it's in with representative of our task force, a monthly update and asking for feedback from that update, which I do receive every so often from community members. I have done 17 of those so far. And we do canvassing in the community throughout all of Manitou with our door hangers, as you know, our bookmarks, which also provide contact information where people can and have given us feedback, and press releases that we coordinate with the PIO outlets, and we do our own press releases. We have our own social media platform that we receive information and feedback from the community. And I know that the city has a platform for that as well in relation to the library. Pikes Peak Bulletin has been a way of receiving feedback that we've either provided and gotten feedback from, not we, but the community uses that as an exchange of ideas. And recently, the city-sponsored community forum where 3 initial options were presented. And ongoing real-time feedback was provided by community, and a 2-week period after that, which then allowed, with our help as a task force, to aggregate that data, which we'll be sharing with you. And so what I'm saying is, we have, over the last 20 years, and particularly the last year, been an avenue for community input. As a matter of fact, all that we've received has gone funneled directly through the city, to the architect. And now we're working with a Capital Campaign Council in the same vein. And so a fear of mine, and when I say this, I know I'm speaking on behalf of the task force, is by allowing this ballot measure to go forward in relation to the library, is that another aspect of us kicking the can down the road? We've been given a charge. The reason why you told us to move ahead is because you wanted us to finally make some headway on this. And again, by allowing this ballot measure to go through, that would just stop it dead in the water. And I don't know, I didn't speak with anybody from Pikes Peak Library District on this, but their patience with the city of Manitou, I was involved in the ballot campaign for us to become part of PPLD, with the expectations that something would be done with the library in this time, which was, 2014. Are they willing to take another detour? I'm just saying this hypothetically. Or are they going to just say, I thought we had a movement on this and now we're not? And so I worry about that. I'm not the only one who does.
Yeah, Rob, can you sum up, please?
Yeah, I am. This is my summary, and that is that this is our best chance. If we don't maintain this momentum and the progress that we're making and allow us to keep moving forward, we may lose this opportunity forever. And the last thing is, we're getting ready we're formalizing our capital campaign. And I know that's a big lift that you've asked us to do, and we're willing to do it, and we are doing it. I don't want, and I just, again, this is my feelings. Is it going to make potential donors skittish that we don't, we start and stop? And so that is a concern of mine on behalf of our task force, that we are going to lose out on financial opportunities to make this thing happen. So I thank you for the time to share these concerns, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will mention to council that at next week's work session, a couple of the items that we have on the agenda are an update from the library and also from the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force. So since those are maybe the kinds of things that this could address, there would be the opportunity to get the latest information next week and then still have a chance to do something, although I don't see that there's going to be a lot of traction for this. Any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem, and then Judith.
Thanks. And I'll speak more generally about this proposal. I consider these sorts of things, when you put this sort of thing on a ballot, it tends to be very divisive within the community. And yes, things tend to be close. I mean, as we know, many things in Manitou end up being, almost 50-50. But the fact is that match was approved, and this council voted to continue with match, and then match approve funding for both the library as well as Hiawatha Gardens. So I think that that kind of shows where the community is as well. The two resolutions council passed for both the library and Hiawatha Gardens did not say anything about, well, we're going to stop and decide yet again and over and over and over again. So I think that that's, I think that that puts a chill. You've got two task forces that are primarily made up of volunteers, citizen volunteers, and it just puts a chill on those volunteers after they put in many, 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 many hours of work to say, oh, hold on, we're going to reconsider yet again. I think that the council was elected to represent the city. So I don't think we need to, every time we have something that's hard or we don't like, to go say, oh, let's put it on the ballot and let the citizens decide. That makes sense for some legislative things or tax things, but not for something like this. I can't agree more with Rob on you lose momentum, and it's just, it breaks my heart to think that we'd lose momentum on these initiatives at this point. And I do ultimately think it's disrespectful to the task forces to consider this yet again. Yeah, and I'll stop at that. Thanks. I'm obviously not in favor of this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Chandler?
I couldn't possibly state it any better than Mayor Pro Tem Fortune and Mr. Rob Dan, and I am wholeheartedly against including advisory questions on the November municipal ballot. This council has passed resolutions, guiding policy regarding the library expansion in Hiawatha Gardens. So, and there's robust community engagement in both of those endeavors. So, I oppose it.
Natalie?
I also oppose it, but I have a different ballot measure I'd like to talk about, and I'm just wondering if this would be a good time to introduce it, or if it is something I should bring up during correspondence, or how that would work.
Maybe if you could state it briefly.
So I was listening to the radio this weekend, and apparently municipalities can pass, they can allow non-citizens to vote in elections, and there are a dozen or so communities that do this, and I thought it'd be really interesting if Manitou, at a time when voting rights are being compromised, expanded voting rights to include certainly undocumented folks, but H1N1 visa holders and green card holders, and just, I think about like Chi Ito and Maria and Alan Navratna, who have won Manny Awards for their work in this community, but they can't vote in our local elections. And so I think this would impact only a dozen or so people, but I think it would be a really important statement this community can make.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments or discussion? Boy, that was a quick draw there. Julie, I think you were up just a fraction of a second. Okay, okay, I got it. Okay, Steve, then Julie.
I like your proposal, Natalie, because my wife is a green card holder. She's not an American citizen, so she could vote. So that would be very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
I'm opposed to it primarily because I don't want to squelch the opportunity to get donations. I don't think Manitou will ever pay for this library on her own. That would be impossible. So it's only going to really happen and come to fruition if we get some major donations. And so I have concerns that donors won't want to donate if they think that we're changing our mind and now we're doing a ballot initiative and all of that. So that was my first reaction, is that it might cause a problem. I mean, I'm not happy with any of the library designs. I was very unhappy with that. I hope we never see anything like that. So I don't want to make it sound like I think all of this is hunky-dory, but as we struggle going forward with the development of this process, I feel that it would just put a terrible damper on the ability of the fundraising group to be successful.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Oh, just quick, Rob, yeah.
I just wanted to add in terms of support that we have in the community is that, and you'll see the updated version in the 60-day report that we're going to be providing to you for next week. We have the Manitou Springs School District who has come out in support of our efforts. We have Pikes Peak Library District, of course, and the city, particularly through the resolution that you provided. And our newest organization of support is the Chamber of Commerce here in Manitou. And so there is widespread community support in our efforts. And to speak, Julie, to your comments about the design, it's preliminary right now, and so we're coming to you as a first step in the early process of what the final design will be presented to you. We're going to Parib tomorrow. Initially, we'll go back to them, and we're going also to, HPC tomorrow, and then Parib next week before we come to see you. So we're still in an initial process of coming to the city council, meaning the city, PPLD, and the architect with a final proposed design. That's still further down the road.
May I ask a follow-up
Sure,
question
go
on
ahead.
that, Mayor?
Yeah.
So I was under the impression that our RFP does not provide for any additional designs. It was the Thorpe design, and if I recall correctly, anywhere between 0 and 3 additional designs is how it was written. So when you say, oh, that was just preliminary, the contract that we already have with this provider allows for him to be required to do another drawing for us?
Well, I know Christina's here, and she could probably speak to it better, but they did provide 3 options. They're more or less conceptual drawings. And from the conversations from the start, from even in the selection process, it was understood that they would submit, whoever the architect would be, they would submit up to 3 conceptual drawings or options, which they have done. And based on those, if you were at the presentation or listened to it, it was tell us what you like about any one of the options, what you don't like, or what we haven't thought of. So those are being used. It could very well be that one of the options is going to be the one brought forward. I don't know. I'm just surmising, but with changes to it based on the feedback that's from the community and from the boards and from city council. And so those were used as a springboard to move forward to a final selection. It's not that they're going to come back, that I understand, with 3 additional options. They're going to use these as a way to start to narrow down what the final design proposal will be.
So there'll be another design called the final design?
Something will, yes, because it was never intended that any one of these you pick 1, 2, or 3, and the one that gets the most votes gets it. That's not the intention.
And actually, Rob will be, or at least your task force will be reporting next week on status, so we'll probably hear this in more detail.
Exactly,
Okay,
yes.
great, good. Anything else? Okay, I think we can move on. Thanks, Rob. Okay, so that takes us to that point in the evening where we turn towards council correspondence. Anybody got anything? Mayor Pro Tem always has something.
Yes, I do. Last week, I went to the police meeting that they met with the Beckers Lane community, and it was just a good opportunity to hear the concerns down there. They've got 3 others scheduled, one this Thursday for Crystal Hills, and I can't remember, Denise sent out the update or sent out the schedule. But I would highly encourage council members to go to that. It's just a great way to hear concerns in various neighborhoods. Went to the inaugural Friendship Day on Friday, and lots of fun, lots of good participation, launching Pike Ride within the community. So I can see where the city can certainly build on that day in the future, and thanks to Alex really for initiating that. And last night we had the candidate workshop, And thanks to all the council members and the staff who showed up and contributed to that. I think it was worthwhile, and I hope that there's some good coverage in the paper so that folks who didn't come will learn some stuff from it as well. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Counselor Chandler?
I don't have any council correspondence, but I have another procedural question. Do we need to vote on number 4? We didn't, there was,
No, we don't. It was
Okay,
kind
I just was-
of for discussion purposes.
okay.
Or-
I was kind of directing that to Judy, actually.
Well, the question I had was Natalie did bring up Counselor Johnson did bring up
Right.
another advisory question, and so, maybe clearer direction might be good on whether we're having any additional questions on the ballot.
Yeah. Pardon? Kind of left that hanging.
Add it as a future agenda item so people know what it's about. Sorry.
Okay, so maybe if there's an interest in this, that we put it on for the work session for next week.
We could discuss it at the work session, then we'd have to take action to implement it August 17th, 2 weeks from tonight. That'd be our cutoff date. Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
good, all right. Anything else, Judith? Okay. Natalie?
I attended the Transportation Advisory Board meeting, and it's just really exciting watching them sort of transition from that SP Plus moment to staff, and then what roles and responsibilities look like, and I think they're on the right track, and so I'm looking forward to their advice and suggestions in the future.
Good, thank you. Julie?
I spoke with someone who lives on Ruxton, and he expressed concerns about Ruxton generally, but the corner of Pilot Knob and Ruxton, where he says his daughter almost got killed the other day. He literally had to pull her out of the street to not be hit by a vehicle who was rounding that corner. He mentioned that this is a very dangerous corner, I believe, and I could be mistaken, that this is the same area where John Shada previously asked that we have a sidewalk built. Is that the same area, John? And the answer was no. Joel said, no, let's just wait and do it at the end when we're done with the whole transportation Ruxton thing. But he said someone is going to die soon, and he wanted me to say his name. It's Brian Aller, O-L-L-E-R. Brian is spelled B-R-Y-A-N. And he said the entire, his neighborhood and the neighbors are all very upset and very concerned. He said one day there was the truck with the big porta potties rounding that corner so quickly that the vehicle kind of keeled over, like partway, and he thought he was going to die from having these porta potties land on him. But then, it managed to right itself up and slow down a little. But he said he doesn't know if a sidewalk is necessary. He talked about speed bumps. He talked about more police presence. But he said it's very bad. Then the other issue I have is that I had friends who used to live here in Manitou, and they're in Evergreen now, and they came down to visit, and they said that, wow, aside from the notwithstanding the construction signs, they said there are so many signs in town, it looks horrible. What happened? So I wanted to relay that because that is my ongoing beef as well. And that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? I guess we're done. Let's go to the city administrator's report. Mr. Cheney?
Update on the MAPS project. What we call the west side will be completed by the end of August. However, east side will probably go till the end of September. That's delays due to utilities. The good news is the west side will be in better shape because it'll be an actual road and sidewalk on that side. So, also, I just wanted to cover the Save the Flats comment. We do have retainage from Wildcat, so when they do leave, we will make sure it's cleaned up properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Denise?
I don't have a lot. I just do want to let you know that Regina, when she spoke tonight, I did get an email from Jeff Jones. And in our 2022 budget, we have, we'll be proposing a water and sewer line and including paving curb to curb on Midland and that whole area. So I just wanted to give you an update on that, that will be in the 2022 budget at this time. And then I've also followed up with Chris, who spoke, and we have, we'll be looking at meeting again. So I wanted to let you know that too.
Okay, great, thank you. Super. Okay, well, the next item is call for an executive session, so I'll go ahead and read that, and then we'll need to ask the audience members to leave. Item L1, executive session. An executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and instruct negotiators pursuant to Section 5.1D of the City of Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning property acquisition in the vicinity of Serpentine Drive. And then we need a motion and a second to go into executive session. Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have seconds. Okay, all in favor say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So at this point, we would ask members of the public to have a nice evening. Thank you. And we appreciate you coming down. We're getting to the point where we're obviously meeting in person again. It's a good feeling. Okay, and